Welcome to the Silver Symposium. Welcome to Spokane. I want to thank Rob for putting this on. Thanks StockPulse for hosting it. Maybe a quick round of applause for free breakfast, which is always nice.
Yeah.
It's a trim panel up here this morning. I'm Nick Hodge. I have Mark Hartmann from Blackjack Silver, and he's going to get into that story, rather shortly here. I'm a newsletter writer. I'm based here in Spokane, born and bred in Baltimore, and came up in the newsletter industry there. Now I own a website called Resource Stock Digest that has a lot of sponsors that are in the junior mining sector, and I also run a publishing company called Digest Publishing that has financial newsletters really that span the gamut of the market, from retirement advice, macro trends, all the way up into private placements, which is probably why I'm sitting on this panel. For the past 7 or 8 years, I've had the good fortune of investing in private placements, writing checks into mining companies, into biotech companies, even into some cannabis companies back in 2016 and 2017, which was great. But really gravitated to the natural resource sector and have been helping to finance and I guess quasi help promote some Idaho stories like Midas Gold, which is now Perpetua, Silver Hammer, Revival Gold. And so I've got to know the Idaho space a little bit. It's, of course, very well known for silver. You know, the Coeur d'Alene mining district is one of the most prolific in the world. And in the past couple of years, the southern part of the state has come on really strong for gold. It sits right on top of sort of the Great Basin of Nevada there. And there's some good gold companies that are developing assets and putting projects through permitting and drilling and developing. So that's how I got to know the space, and again, why I'm sitting up here. We'll turn it over to questions after Mark goes through his company bullet points, and you can ask him any questions you want. He's based in Coeur d'Alene. He's been there since the early 1980s and is a mining engineer by trade and is familiar with many of the companies in and around the area. And I'm just a jack of all trades sort of generalist. So if you have any market questions about precious metals, direction of the market, or anything like that, I'm happy to discuss or answer the best I can. And with that, Mark.
Well, thank you, Nick. So I'm here to talk about Blackjack Silver. We are located in Butte, Montana. And just as a disclaimer, anything I talk about, if I use the word resource or reserve, everything is historical in nature. We do not have any 43101 compliant resource numbers out yet. Hopefully they'll be shortly. So that's just our disclaimer to start. So we are a private company, and we are leasing the massive historic underground operations that Anaconda had in Butte, Montana. And we have a fantastic property position that runs maybe 2.5 square miles or so. And the property that we have contains north of 300 million ounces of silver equivalent. That was identified by Anaconda and New Butte Mining. New Butte Mining came in the late 80s and early 90s and mined very briefly. But before that, it was all Anaconda. Mining started in the area in the late 1880s, and by 1910 or so, Anaconda had consolidated the district. So so north of 300 million ounces of silver equivalent resources in the mine. The Anaconda numbers are very high quality. They're high confidence. They're very high grade. The numbers also include what they designate as developed and probable. So very similar to proven and probable. Does not include what they call future and/or exploration, which would be considered a possible resource. And so there's a tremendous resource that's still available underground for us. So many companies, especially junior companies, when they want to identify or when they want to get into the mining game, they need to have some financing. They need to acquire some land, obviously prospective land. They need to do enough geology work to identify what the quantity and the quality of the resource may look like. They need to do metallurgical testing to make sure that it's something that will work, that they can get the metal out of it. All of that essentially has been done for us with the groundwork that Anaconda had already completed. And so we are starting in a place where most companies like to end, which is to have a resource that's as significant as we have. And so we are very fortunate to be in the position that we are, to have such a tremendous resource right off the get-go. We also have flexibility in our resource, meaning that there's some metal zonation within the land that we have. So as an example, if the prices of gold or precious metals spike, we have high-grade precious metals. As an example, we have some drill holes that run maybe a 10-foot interval that run north of an ounce of gold and a few hundred ounces of silver that are maybe only 300 feet below the surface. So that's just an example of some of the high-grade precious metals that we have. We also have zinc-rich resources where you can find 10 to 15% zinc over some very good mining widths. And then if you get closer to the Montana Resources pit, it's much richer in copper. And so depending on what metal prices are, we have the ability to go after different metals as well. So with this tremendous start that we had, we decided to do a small drill program and drilled a number of holes, and ended up shutting down the program just in the middle of winter, just because many of you know what winters are like in Butte. So we shut down the program. But interestingly, we hit some veins, hit a vein in two of the holes. It was very unexpected. That ran 40 feet of interval, 40 feet of drill interval for us, that ran about 13 ounces of silver equivalent. And so it's just a mineral wonderland where we have our land position. So what are we doing? So when we first got the property, the initial information we had was, a lot of the information was from New Butte Mining. And again, they went in the late 80s and were done by January of 1991, they were done. And so for those of you that are familiar with the Silver Valley, Bunker Hill had reopened under Bunker Limited. The Star Mine up in Burke had reopened about the same time that New Butte Mining was doing their work in Butte, and they all shut down in very early 1991. So it was just a market crash. The work that New Butte did was very good work, but they were just cash poor. So they didn't have the ability to do a lot of exploration and or development. So when they were mining, what they initially developed was typically 4-foot wide veins. And so when we went in, we were expecting that we were going to find the 4-foot wide veins, and that was going to be our future. And we have expertise in that, so we were very comfortable with mining the narrow vein. But what we have seen once we started digging into the data is there are other veins that they just didn't have the time and the resources to develop, that are anywhere from 4 up to perhaps 90 feet in width. So that provides us with opportunities to do some very low-cost mining, which was obviously just a tremendous surprise for us, and again, a great opportunity for us. And so what are we doing now? So, we're focusing at this point on generating our 3D model. And we've digitized over 10,000 maps. And again, Anaconda had just a great library of information when it came to mapping. They were the world's leaders when it came to geology efforts and geology performance underground. So whether it came to face sampling or underground mapping or surveying, whatever it was, Anaconda was a leader in the industry. So we've digitized. Rangefront, who is here with us today, has digitized over 10,000 maps. We have hundreds of drill holes that we have into the database. We have thousands upon thousands of face samples that we've already entered into the database, and we have tens of thousands more yet to get into the database. We just have a massive amount of information available to us, which again makes our life easy because we don't need to go out and generate that data. We have, so just the quality of the historic work is just second to none. So in our modeling that we did, we identified 93 different veins So just a mineral wonderland. But of those 93, there was enough information on 53 of the veins to include them in our modeling. So again, this isn't a one vein wonder. So one of the advantages of having a multitude of veins is a single development can access multiple veins and therefore multiple working faces, which then enhances, of course, the production volumes that we can look at. So we continue to de-risk the project. And so not only are we continuing to do a 3D modeling and entering data into that, we're in the process of producing our 43101 resource. And our resource, we've had it should be out any day now. We've had the preliminary look at it, but it's not public, so it's not numbers that I can talk about. But what I can say is being that we have not entered all of the data, the tens of thousands of face samples that we have, that our initial resource numbers are not going to be 350 million ounces of silver equivalent, just simply because we haven't entered all of the data. We have 3 people working on entering data nearly full time. We're going to be having 4 or 5 college students that are going to be working on it part-time. So we are months and months out from getting all of the data entered into the system. Depending on what the resource model shows really determines what our future is as far as our de-risking efforts. Our plan at this point is to pursue a PEA next, but again, it depends on whether or not the the resource model shows sufficient grade and tonnage. We may have to pursue a second phase of exploration, whether it's some underground work or whether it's more drilling from the surface, or whether it's just jumping right into the PEA. So after that, what do? We're obviously looking at an IPO. We initially had planned on doing an IPO this fall, but the market just dumped, and doing IPOs is very timing sensitive, and now is not a good time to do an IPO. And so that's kind of on the back burner for the moment. We also have selected a permitting company to start our permitting efforts. And again, it depends on a lot on markets. It depends on what the resource numbers show. But we're prepared to start permitting as well. And permitting, in our permitting effort, and again, another great advantage that we have is that we are going to be permitting very near surface, essentially from surface to about 1,000-foot depth. And so this would be accessible by either shaft or mechanized equipment using ramps and declines. And so when we do the permitting, everything is going to be above water, so we will have a zero discharge. So when it comes to permitting, having a zero discharge is huge. And so especially in an area that has where the groundwater is loaded with other metals. I mean, obviously, with all of the mining in the area, it's a very metal-laden water system in there. So having zero discharge is going to be a big advantage for us. Permitting should be relatively easy as a result of that. Now, easy is again, a relative statement. It's not like we're going to get permitted in 3 months, but we also don't expect it to take 30 years. And so we will be mining above the water table, have zero discharge. In addition, we are not in a pristine environment, so we're not out in a national forest someplace. So any of you that have been through Butte, we are immediately adjacent to the Montana Resources pit. In fact, I don't know if there's been a picture up there or not, but it shows some of the historic shafts and head frames and which is on our property and which we may resurrect. We may already have a lot of work already done for us with the head frames and with the shafts and some of the declines that have been started. So it's a very, very brownfield location. So it's not, again, in a pristine environment. Everything is on private land, so we will be permitting through the state of Montana and not through the federal government. Again, another advantage for us as well. So initially I was asked to do a 10-minute presentation, And that was the notes I had for a very brief presentation. I would just invite you to come back to our booth. Fairly easy to find. So come back. We have samples of our core that we have drilled. We have some maps showing some of the historic anaconda information, so you can see the quality of the information that's available. So please come back and visit with us, and love to chat with you and tell you about what we're doing. So with that, Nick, I'll turn it back.
Can I ask some questions?
Certainly.
So can you talk more about the permitting regime in Montana? I know this is an Idaho panel, and I might ask you some questions about that, but can you talk a little bit more about why you believe the permitting path is going to be so easy in addition to it being on private land?
Good question. So the state of Montana is, in the last election, they had a change in the government to the governor that was elected was a very pro-business, pro-job governor. And so right now the iron is hot, and so it's a great time to be looking at permitting in the state of Montana, certainly as compared to the past. And again, we are going to be Montana permitting only, not the Forest Service or the BLM. So that's a real advantage for us. Now, again, we are in a Superfund site, but again, we are very brownfield. The areas that we're looking at putting our operations on are considered to be active mine. That's just a designation by the permitting agencies, meaning that no reclamation would be done until mining activity is over. In fact, some of the areas that we would be active in, the plan is that they would never be remediated because they are just a massive tailings area or a massive dump, as an example. And so that's the area that we're going to be involved in. And so our reclamation plan would be that we would reclaim it when we're done with it. And again, being that we're a small underground operation, our footprint on the surface is going to be fairly small. So reclamation would be an advantage, whether it's the EPA or the state of Montana or the local community in Butte. It would be an advantage that we could go in and we'd leave it better than what the plan is right now. And so we think it's a very positive environment for permitting at this point.
Do you think you'll ever be able to open pit in Montana again?
The answer is I do believe that. It's not our plan to be doing any open pit mining, but I do believe that there probably could be, especially if it was on state land. I think that's a real advantage at this point, but it's not our plan to be doing some open pit activity.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the financial picture? Maybe not necessarily the share structure unless you want to get into it, but maybe the current treasury and the eventual plan for IPO, where you might be listing and what that path looks like.
Okay. So we currently have about $3 million in the bank, which is sufficient for what we want to do in the near term. Obviously, if people are interested in investing in private placement at this point, we would be all ears. We are all in for that. We, at some point, as Nick said, would be looking at an IPO. And again, as I mentioned before, this is not a good time to be looking at that. But we have enlisted, you may need to help me, Nick. We have letters of intent, if that's the right way to state it, with both brokers in Canada as well as in the U.S. and New York. And so it really depends on the market, which direction we will go as far as looking at the IPO. And again, the people that we're looking at that are going to be handling the IPO for us, some days they're hot, some days they're cold. It's a very sensitive market, and Nick probably knows a whole lot more about that than I do. But so right now, IPO is on the back burner until the market gets a little bit more friendly for us. But we are always interested in private placements. We have a number of companies, some fairly major companies that have invested in us at this point. Obviously, small amounts, a few million dollars each. But we are always looking for continued investments, and we continue to have bigger companies interested in us. A lot of companies are just waiting for the resource estimate to come out, and once that comes out, obviously that will be that will be the target for other companies to come in and take a little harder look at us.
And what about local approval? Questions in 1 second. What about local approval? So it's an ESG world out there, as we know, right? And mining, despite the fact that minerals are needed to make the batteries and the windmills and the solar panels of the world, continue to get a quasi, bad rap. How do the locals feel? What are the economic benefits of the project? Can you speak to that a little bit?
I can. When we first came into town, maybe a year and a half ago, we met resistance on every level because, and using the words of the chief executive of Butte Silver Bow which is the county city government that are combined, and so the mayor is called the chief executive. It was, we have seen too many companies come in and make all kind of promises, telling us how many jobs they're going to make, and a year later they're gone and nothing happened. And so we've spent the last year and a half building bridges and earning the trust of ARCO, who's managing some of the cleanup efforts of Butte Silver Bow for the state of Montana, and for the locals. We've met and had tours so the locals can come and see what we're planning on doing and see what the impact is on them. And we have, we'll always have an opposition. Any mine is going to have an opposition, even if they're on, Antarctica. And so we have a very positive environment right now with both the state and the locals. Certainly the local government is very much in favor of us. And so one of the statistics I shared with Nick earlier was Montana Resources, who has the Centennial Pit right next to us, is 24% of the Butte economy. And so hypothetically, if we had a similar number of employees as they did, we could theoretically be another 20% or whatever the math is to the Butte economy. And so we would be a huge addition to the community of Butte. And there's an awful lot of the local government and agencies and the Chamber of Commerce's that understand how that works. And we've been very cognizant of doing what we say. We don't want to be one of those companies where we get the bad rap. Well, the company came in and said they're going to generate 300 jobs and do this and do that and spend this much money, and they fell flat in their face. We don't want to do that. And so we've made it very clear that our promises are going to be very few, and those that we make are going to be kept. And we've been very successful with that to this point. And again, we feel it's a lot about relationship building. We are going to be part of the Butte community and not just New York suits that fly in once in a while to tell people what to do. We are part of the Butte community. So our project manager is sitting over here as an example. He lives in Butte, and they and the rest of our team that are there they're Butte people, and we want to make sure that we're an important part of that community.
Great.
Long answer to your short question.
No, it's great. I saw a couple of hands here.
Welcome. Like hearing that, we're from Montana. So.
Great.
And we've been to Butte many times. I wonder what your projected mine life.
It depends on, obviously it depends on a lot of things. It depends on what the resource estimate is. Ultimately, the size of the resource isn't going to be an issue for us. And so what we need to accurately determine is going to be the mining rate. And so again, once we get the 3D model fine-tuned a little bit more, if we're mining on 4-foot wide veins, then a 750 ton a day operation is a big operation. If we're mining the 4 feet wide veins plus some 20, 30, 40 foot wide veins, now we could be looking at 1,000 or 1,500 ton a day operation fairly easily. And so I would expect that everything is going to depend on the resources, but I would expect that we would be much more than a flash in the pan. Let me just say that. I don't want to say numbers because I can be held to that, but it's this is a very, very significant resource that's there. So I expect that we would be in Butte for the long term.
Are you open to tours?
Yes, we would. Now, again, none of the underground workings are safe and accessible, so we would not do anything with that. But yes, we would definitely entertain some tours, and we've done some of that with the local community as well.
Where would that ore go? Have you given any thought to that? Is there synergies with your neighbor, or do you have to find a mill to take it to?
Our plan would be to construct a mill.
To build a mill?
Yes, build a mill on site, hopefully right next to the shaft or decline that we put in. I mean, we're engineers, and so we may not have everything definitively on paper yet, simply because we're still working on the resource model. It's kind of hard to make a plan before you know exactly what the resource model looks like. But we undoubtedly have plans for what we're going to do, where we're going to go with it. We're considering smelters. We're also in discussions with other companies that are looking at doing something bigger with us. Whether any of that comes to fruition remains to be seen. But we're moving forward on multiple paths, and one of the paths hopefully will be successful for us.
Would you please, excuse me, will you please tell us more about your team, specifically team members that have experience developing a brownfield project?
Okay. So our CEO wasn't able to make it today. He got very ill a day or two ago, and he's been involved with, from a corporate standpoint, doing all kinds of small companies, and he's been a research analyst for big companies. I have been involved. My entire career has been involved with mining, obviously, and I have, as an example, managed the Sunshine Mine in the Kellogg when it was back the real Sunshine Mining Company. I was a mine manager there for a number of years. I was chief engineer for a while, so I was there for a total of 16 years. I was also at the Galena mine. I was part of the team that did the acquisition from Corp that took over the Corp and the Galena mines in the Silver Valley. So the rest of the team that we have, so our project manager has been a manager, operations manager for 10 or 12 years, something on that order, and including permitting of expansions of mines, and so he's very involved and aware of that. Our chief engineer has been involved with small operations and the permitting efforts and the acquisition of land, whether it's through claims or whatever, for much of his career. Our geology staff has worked from everything from initial discovery all the way through into operations. So we have a very broad group of people that work for us that all have different expertise, but at the same time we're all one team. We all work together on the project, trying to just make sure this project goes forward. Hopefully I answered your question.
I'm primarily interested in geologists. Are there any geologists that we might have heard of before? Or?
Well, probably not. One is sitting there, one's sitting there. So I guess what I would encourage you to do is to stop by our booth when we can get into a much more in-depth conversation and answer any of the detailed questions you may have. And as you go through the showroom, you'll find us very easily. We have a lot of banners, and we have some of our core that's available to look at. So I just encourage everyone to stop by and have any questions, any more detailed questions you have. If you want to dig into something deeper, please stop by. But I'm still willing to answer any other questions that anyone else may have.
Any other questions? Where can people learn more about the company online, maybe the website?
So blackjacksilver.com is our website. I encourage everyone to take a look at that as well, but you would probably get more information back here at our booth where you can talk to us face to face, and that way you can ask questions and get detailed answers.
Great. David Morgan is going to be speaking in just about 10 minutes. He's got the keynote over in the speaker hall. I hope you had a wonderful breakfast. I'll be giving my presentation later this afternoon at 4 p.m. And I guess I'll plug my websites again since I'm up here on the stage, resourcestockdigest.com and Digest Publishing if you'd like to learn more about me and the publications I put out. And if there are no more questions, then I appreciate your attention and I hope you had a good breakfast and have a great rest of the show.